we really think that it's a rich world where we can tell dark and interesting and political stories, and it's important to be like super focused on what this world can and can't do. What has it done previously? What is good? What is bad? And what parts of those things are we interested in? I know you're going to talk about it a little bit later, but we have sort of an idea that we want to make LARPs, for example, the thing we're doing in Berlin. We want to include everything in the world of darkness that we can have, where we have an interesting idea about. If we can't figure that out, then we're not going to do it. And that's, we don't want to include everything. We want to include what we find interesting. And these are our goals when we do stuff. We want to demonstrate why World of Darkness is relevant. We want to build positive communities, because vampire especially have had a long history of toxic communities, including where I started. And we want to work really hard to first understand why this is happening, and then figure out how can we make something that is not toxic. And the final thing, which is super interesting, we have a story world that has basically been dead for more than 10 years when CPP owned it, because they wanted to do the multiplayer online game, and they were very controlling about the IP at that time. So there has been a community who have kept this world alive and played the games and been passionate about it, and it's super important to celebrate these people, including also us, of course. That it is quite remarkable that we all still have an interest in a world that's that old and are still creating stuff in that world.
Yeah, so design also means design principles, design aesthetics, and design ideas. And like Bjarke said, the kind of really the starting point was just like when you take the Vampire the Masquerade book in your hand and you like look at it. What does it say? Obviously, Vampire the Masquerade, so there's got to be vampires in it, right? Vampires, that would make sense. The Masquerade is the word, so maybe a masquerade would be important too as a concept. But when you start to elaborate from these very simple starting points, you start to notice things that take you into a different direction than a lot of the tradition of vampire lore. In a very basic way, what does a vampire do? What are vampires known for? If Bjarke here is a vampire, what do we expect him? How do we know he's a vampire? We know he's a vampire because he drinks blood. I mean, that is the vampire thing, drinking blood. It's like hunting the living. Bjarke hunts the living. Yes.
I have 0 sometimes.
So, but in a lot of the vampire lore I played, and I played a lot, I don't think I have actually ever hunted the living. I'm not sure, but I don't have a single memory of going into these vampire lore campaign games where that would have happened. So we started to think like, what are these core vampire things, part of this world, and how to make those work in a LARP, and then what kind of design implications those ideas have. And obviously, this leads us to, we're going to talk about more about End of the Line, where this photo is from, later, but that's really some of the things that then was done in practice in End of the Line. Like, just for example, you hit the living. You can't hunt the living if you don't have the living, so you have to have human characters, and actually you have to have quite a lot of them. And then from there you get the question that to have this like, do you need to play a vampire to have the vampire experience? Because you can, if somebody hunts, there's the hunting experience, but there's also the being hunted experience. And our idea was that that can also be fun. That can also be interesting to be the person who is hunted. And of course, if the game is designed, or like we try to design it, is that you can be both. So depending on your situation, depending on your circumstance, you are either the hunter or the hunted. For example, we imagine the vampire might even imagine himself to be the hunter. But right there might be a bunch of ghouls who have decided that this bloodborne shit is not going to fly, and they have a baseball bat. So So that suddenly changes the position of the vampire very radically into being the person who is hunted. And the way we are kind of trying to approach this whole thing, like the World of Darkness is a vast space. And again, in a lot of the games I played, there was this attempt to do like these very broad games that are in a sense not so specific. While here our goal is to take some kind of an extremely specific instance of the World of Darkness, a specific moment in time, a specific situation, something really, really sharp, and then design a game completely focused around that thing. So for example, in End of the Line, the rules mechanics, the general structure of the game, the characters, everything is focused on this thing, this one thing that we are trying to do. The hunter, the hunted, the vampire techno party, the masquerade, in that situation. And actually it has also taught me some new things about how these things work. Because in New Orleans, when we noticed that when we run End of the Line, masquerade means that humans should not know about the vampires. But what happens if you are on the dance floor and you make somebody into a vampire and then you get kind of separated and that person knows nothing about what's going on and then makes another vampire like in the next 5 minutes and then another vampire and you have this vampire epidemic suddenly happening on the dance floor. and that's not the kind of situation that really happened in this kind of older type of vampire that I used to play. But in this vampire, it can happen very fast. And suddenly you have like a serious crisis in your hands, but a very masquerade crisis. And that's, again, back to the core of the thing. But that's the specific instances is really the key. And what we mean by tailoring the mechanics and the structure and the design of the game to each specific thing is that in Berlin we're running 2 games ourselves. End of the Line in a rerun and then a new game called Enlightenment in Blood. Enlightenment in Blood will have different mechanics from End of the Line because their needs are different. They don't require the same kind of design ideas because Enlightenment in Blood is the first night of the Anarch Revolution. The Anarch Revolution is happening, and just to make it clear, it is not the first night of like a possible Anarch Revolution. The Anarch Revolution is successful from the first minute of the LARP. The real question of the LARP is what happens in the revolution, who controls the revolution, what is the outcome of the revolution. And then when we think about what kind of mechanics we need mechanics where the Anarch vampire is king. The Anarch vampire has to be cannot be suppressed in this LARP, since that would destroy the basic premise. So therefore you have to take this into account when you make up mechanics, and therefore different mechanics. And this is what we mean by bespoke mechanics and what works specifically for this LARP.
Yeah, and it's and we of course looked at all the rules that we've been in contact with, the research and so on, and it's very clear, and also the way I did it when I ran my own campaign in Copenhagen was that I wanted to take everything that I saw of the mechanics and rules in the books and port them over to the LARP. And a lot of those things don't work. And I think that was when I got sort of my first design revelation, which was that if you make a mechanic or a rule, your players will use it. So of course I made, because I thought it was cool to have bomb making as a skill, which means that your players will make bombs, and then they will explode those bombs, and players will die in a very boring way. Or in what also happened, they will forget, they'll leave the bomb in the metro when they're going to the location, and then there's a crisis in the metro, right? So you have to, there are always consequences with your design actions. And one of the big consequences in the Mind's Eye Theater book, which is a LARP system that White Wolf published, is of course the first rule of that rule set, which is no touching. That means none whatsoever. And of course, in our tradition, we of course act out most things. Of course, not things that are dangerous, because we don't want to kill each other and so on. But if this is the outset, then it becomes super difficult to do a lot of stuff. So we also have to go back and sort of reevaluate all our notions about about every rule or mechanic we put in the world.
Can I put that back
Yes.
for a second? I think that when you look at this thing here, what you're looking at is safety rules. And what we want is emotionally powerful LARP that has a lot of punch that really kind of like impacts you in a very strong way. And these are kind of the old Manjai theater safety mechanics which are meant to protect the player. Similarly, we don't want to kill our players or traumatize them for life. That would be bad. So what we are also very strongly believe in our kind of core design principles is safety. We want players to be safe, but not this way, but in a way that allows for a more immediate, more physical play experiences. And the kind of best test case of this we made so far was in New Orleans, where we had put really a lot of effort into making these safety mechanics. And the reason for that was that the player base was almost 100% completely new to us. So we didn't kind of personally know who these people were, so we thought that we had to really put solid effort into making them comfortable. And what that LARP I think taught me was that safety, if you're dealing with dark stuff, if you're dealing with hardcore stuff, if you're dealing with stuff that demands a lot from the participants, safety is an accelerator. Safety enables you to go faster, further, and deeper into these kind of spaces because people are comfortable, they trust each other, they know each other's limits, and they can judge things much better. And that way, I think that, like we had with Martin Eriksson, who was just here speaking about other wonderful stuff, discussions about the tone of the game. And at one point, he was exasperated with, I think, me personally, and he said that this is the world of darkness, not the world of kindness. But I think that I loved that expression because I thought that if we want to have the in-game world of darkness, off-game it has to be the world of kindness. And if it's off-game the world of kindness, then the in-game is really going to be much darker in the world of darkness. So, I don't know. Maybe I have to propose that we should use it as a slogan.
Yeah.
Because he invented it.
Yeah. Let's show the video from the trailer thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite apparent when you see the trailer. Is that the visual style of Norway is vastly different from the gothic punk of the 90s.
This is the logic. So therefore, this mechanic that Bjarke just described, which gives the umpires a lot of reason to hunt in the larp, so that everybody can have this experience.
And we also wanted the game to be physical, we wanted it to be close, because vampires is also about passion, being afraid, and so on. And if you have the trust among the players, then you can go quite far in that direction. And the mechanic, when you had to use your power, we wanted to be very seamless, and we wanted that you could stand right next to somebody and you wouldn't realize. So when you had to use your power, you would walk up to somebody, you had to look them in the eye, and then you have to grab them by, touch their neck, and then you say a code phrase. So there's both verbal confirmation and there's physical confirmation, both with the touching but also with the eye contact. So you know that the other participant are actually focused on, that there is an exchange of game mechanics going on. And one, it had to be seamless, and two, we really wanted people to touch each other. So that's why we have the mechanics. So if you wanted to use your powers, you needed to go and grab somebody by the back of their neck.
There's also kind of like a philosophy behind what kind of powers we like. Is that the use of like a vampire power is an invitation to interaction. It's an invitation to do something interesting. So for this purpose, just if we talk in very concrete terms, presence is great. Because presence powers are always like that. So we have a lot of Toreador and Rujak characters in the game, then they have presence powers which work great for this. And just to give the opposite example, for example, Dominate is actually kind of tricky here, because at least in my experience it's often used in LARPs to shut down play. This kind of go away, shut up, and so on. But that's, but for here it was not like a thing we had to solve because we didn't have very many characters who had it. So yeah, we could focus on the stuff that we thought we could make work.
And since we have, of course, we could have chosen any clan and put in the game, but we decided to only put clans in where we could figure out great mechanics for their disciplines. So since we can't make people fly or turn into a bat, we didn't have any powers there. Yeah.
And which mechanic do you use to resolve conflict between players?
So for fighting and so on?
Yeah. Or social conflict. Do you use the stone, paper, scissors as the first edition?
The thing we did when people had to fight is that everybody had a fighting skill from 1 to 5. Yeah. And if you wanted to fight, you showed that you had 3 and the other person showed 4. Okay. And then you use what we call bullet time consent, which is that you start out really slow, or you stop play and say, off game, how do you want to play this out? And say, I'm fine with some stunt fighting, and you can throw me into the wall, or let's just not fight, right? And then you resolve it, because this LARP is very much not about...
You resolve the action before the action,
yes.
And the player plays the scene as the debate.
Yeah. Okay. So the interesting part is the sort of the visual surface of the fighting, not the fighting itself. So if somebody is fighting, that's great for atmosphere. But since this game is not about, it's not a game about resolving anything through violence, or it's not about winning a fight, then we wanted to make those mechanics as boring as possible so you weren't tempted to use them. You only used it to drive the story, not to win or to be in a better position and so on. Does that make sense?
There is kind of one, the kind of first step to the combat thing that we thought here, since it's an illegal techno party. So what kind of fights happen at an illegal techno party? Are they duels to the death, where one participant and another participant try to kill each other? No. What you have in illegal techno parties are brawls, where people kind of like fight, like are you looking at me, and then sort of punch. But in that kind of a fight, it's not necessarily really about winning. It's just about fighting. So for us, the instruction was that the question number 1 is somebody trying to win this fight? If no, then just sort of act it out. If yes, if it's more serious, if it's like a serious fight, then use the mechanics. But we wanted to introduce this idea that actually it is often not in this specific setting. It's not about winning. It's just about like being an idiot in a party.
Yeah. Also about fighting, we wrote in the game materials is that fighting really sucks. It hurts really bad. If any of you have been in a fight, you really hurt afterwards. Your hands hurt and your face hurts when somebody put their hands in your face, right? So, and this also applies to vampires. And we also wanted to convey that fighting is pretty shitty to begin with. So it's not, we didn't want to romanticize the fighting.
Yeah.
We have about 7 minutes. More into the line. Oh yeah. just one more thing about end-of-the-line mechanics is that this is the start of one of the pre-written characters, and the dots are of course very important in the rule system of the storyteller system. We didn't want those things, but we wanted to sort of nod and acknowledge that the dots reference it because we have used so many hours putting those dots in those on paper. So we came up with a different system which was not about winning or losing or using power, but more a direction of play for your character that you could interpret. So for example, Chris here has 4 dots in hard working, and then the player will sort of interpret that, and he has 1 dot in saying no, so he's really shitty at saying no. And that gives a direction for your character that you can use if you want to. And all characters have 3 of those. So, yeah, it's a different take on what the dots can do. Too many slides.
That was my favorite, the previous one, in terms of creating the vampire aesthetic.
The shitty vice photo?
Yeah, the shitty vice photo style.
Yeah.
Did everyone have the same 3 scale for dots? Saying no, positive, and hardworking?
No, everybody had it was unique for everybody.
Yeah.
And what we tried to do there is that when they are so extreme, it gives you kind of like if you have 3 dots in something, you go, I don't know. But if you have 5 or 4 or 1, it means that you can like do something more extreme.
Yeah.
And if it's a short game, that's good. So that's why they were like that there, and also in pretty much every other character they were scaled like that. And also like when we choose the things like that, saying no specifically, for example, is chosen so that you have a reason to go up, is to go along with stupid things. So when you're minding your own business and some really scary looking person with possibly blood on his shirt comes to you and says, hey, you want to come with me to around the corner, just the 2 of us? And you think that's a bad idea. You guys are guilty. Oh yes. And because so the idea is that when you play that character, you can have an excuse to be a bit stupid about stuff, which leads to fun stuff in the game.
Yeah, and I think also when it is one-shots, you go around the big problem about campaign larping, where people have a lot of invested time, money, and energy into something that they then internalize and they gain ownership of the thing. So it's really hard to change the direction of a campaign because all the players are invested in it. And also sort of the step after that, some players also internalize it to such a degree that it becomes part of their identity. People who, like, I'm a larper, but some people say that I'm a vampire larper. And when you try to change the thing that they love so much that they have turned it into part of their identity, it will feel like a personal attack, and then they will fight it with all the energy that they have. And that's one of the issues that, at least when I ran campaigns, that was one of the things that happened, and also why I stopped. That it turned into this thing where I could not make the best possible game because people were fighting me, making it into what I thought was the best possible game. So we work very hard to see this is collaborative, and there's a lot of freedom that you don't have to invest in campaigns, for example, but doing it one night, and you can go around the corner with the stranger, because that's going to be a great experience when he violently murders me. But you don't want to lose your investment in time in the campaign by doing that.
Yeah. Are we moving from this to another? No, convention.
No,
questions? Yes.
Do you think there is a future for campaign marketing in this world?
I think so. I think it needs to be reinvented, and I think there's so much work to do to change the culture that is in the vampire community. It turns toxic very fast, and I have sort of a theory, and this sounds like super shitty. I've done vampire campaigning for many years, so this is also about me. But vampire traditionally is about intrigue and drama. So people who go to vampire campaigns and stay there are people who really love intrigue and drama. Some of them also like intrigue and drama outside the game. And this creates an environment where there's a lot of intrigue and drama, and that creates a lot of attrition on people, and then people stop playing who don't like the drama, and then you have more and more people who actually like the drama. So that's my sort of analysis. It might be totally wrong, and I'm not condemning any of the players. I love them very much, the people I do play all the time. But that is a problem that needs to be addressed, and need to figure out how to fix that. And I don't have an answer for it, but I would love to fix it, because I would love to do vampire campaigning again. But I have not done that because I don't know how to fix that problem. Yeah.
Maybe we can talk just very quickly about, because we're running out of time, but we are not the only people in this world doing this stuff. There's also there's another company, Joba Cloud Studios, whose kind of like a flagship thing is Convention of Thorns, which I played, which is a wonderful LARP. Set in this Convention of Thorns, which is like a super important historical event in the history of vampire, where the Camarilla and the Sabbath, these big vampire factions are formed. So it's basically, I think in the material to, like the pre-game discussion, it was often kind of said that it's the Vampire UN. It's a very political game. But one key feature of this specific sort of instance in the World of Darkness is that you can have a lot of very different LARP experiences in there. So when we made End of the Line, what we tried to do was one thing. And in a sense, it's almost the same thing for every player. You go there to dance, you go there to hunt, you go there to be hunted. The characters are different, but it's in this space. While with Convention of Thorns, which is also a much bigger LARP, much longer LARP, the space is much bigger. So you can have very different experiences in this kind of like instance of the World of Darkness. For example, I myself had a really great game that was only kind of distantly related to the political stuff that was happening in there. I had a very personal game about sort of falling from grace and joining the Sabbath and that kind of stuff. Wonderful stuff. I love the Wolverine. I have done one great Wolverine scene in LARP. But that I think also shows that when you think about the scale of the game and when you think about the style of the game, you can do a lot of different things also than what we did with End of the Line. And a Convention of Thorns is also going to be run again. And
yeah,
I think that is the website where
that is
the information.
And now we're over time, so we have 1 minute to pitch Berlin.
I'll give you 5 more minutes.
So
Thank you.
So this is the next thing we are doing. World of Darkness Berlin. It's an event, somewhat like, in fact, something like Knutepunkt, in fact, Berlin about the World of Darkness and all the different things there, tabletop, card games, and of course LARP. And our idea there is that we can play a number of LARPs in a succession with high production value, high quality. You can play End of the Line on Thursday, you can play Enlightenment in Blood on Friday, and the kind of flagpole thing we have there with LARP, the kind of the big new thing is Enlightenment in Blood, which is City LARP, big City LARP, the first night of the Anarch Revolution in Berlin, the fall of the Camarilla and the rise of the Anarchs. That is what is happening here.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things when you work directly with White Wolf, this is under license from them, of course, is that we gain access to the official meta plot. So when you play Lightning Blood, whatever happens in that LARP is what's going to be in Berlin in the World of Darkness afterwards.
So in very concrete terms, what that means is that it's a LARP about the kind of who gets to decide, who gets to define the flow of the revolution. And here, the kind of real-life example that I've used a lot with this LARP is, just to give you an example of what that means, is the revolution in Iran. Because in Iran, when the Shah fell, there was 2 directions the revolution could go. A socialist revolution and kind of an Islamist theocratic revolution that are this small, but they are like here. But at the same time, both of those forces are needed, and all of these forces are needed. All of these forces of the Anarch Revolution are needed to make it happen, so that it can be real and change the face of the city.
Yeah, that's in line with that. And on top of that, of course, there's the convention and a lot of talks and panels, and we have 15 premiere scenarios. Some of them are storytellers, some of them are bespoke or larps. So there's a lot. There's so much stuff going on, and there's a little bit for everybody. Yes. That's the website you can go and check more of the game and the card. Questions? We have no time.
But ask us many.
But ask us anyways. Yes.
Go for it.
Do you already have stuff in the pipeline for after?
Yes.
Yes, last night I was drunkenly pitching stuff to Martin.
Yes.
We've also done it sober.
We also done it sober. But yes.
Very briefly, you mentioned going around the corner and being murdered.
Yes.
But was the majority of vampire-human interaction on End of the Line resulting in the humans being killed? Or was there non-lethal feedings?
There was a lot of feedings, very little killing. In the Helsinki run, very few. In the American run in New Orleans, there was more killing. Yes.
But we asked people to do it so that, and also you can control as a, you cannot be killed against your will as a player. So the way we ask people to do it is if you want a murder scene, the last half hour of the larp is a great time for it, and not the first half hour.
How close is your cooperation with White Wolf? Are you sort of the official LARP part of White Wolf from now on?
No, we are one of them. So their strategy is they want to collaborate with more people and do many different things.
Yeah.
So just in very concrete terms, the way it works is that we pitch them stuff, and they say like, okay, this is great. Could you do this? And also you might want to know that we have this thing here which you might want to include. And when you go, great, we'll do that, and then we go forward. And that's the sort of relationship.
How did you solve the feeding part?
In End of the Line, all the vampires got a small bottle of fake blood, and they could use it or not. And then when you fed off people in the Helsinki run, you bit them in the arm or the neck. In the New Orleans run, because it's a vastly different player culture, you said off-game feeding. Then the person said, yes please. They acknowledged they wanted. Then you said neck, hand or wrist. So you could either bite them in the neck, you could bite your own hand on the neck, or you could bite the wrist. It was up to the person being fed upon to choose how close they wanted the interaction.
This question might have been more appropriate at the White Wolf panel, but I wasn't there. I see no mention of the new world events. Is that a purposeful design element to kind of go back to the Masquerade and ignore all of that 2000 stuff?
Yeah, so what they've done is that there's now two game lines. There's the Chronicles of Darkness, which is set in that Gothic 90s, and then there's the World of Darkness, which is contemporary and are looking forward. So it's two different.
So Chronicles of Darkness is the old new World of Darkness,
Yeah.
and Onyx part is doing stuff there and so on. But the kind of main thrust is in the old classic.
Thank you. I have a flyer.
Thank you.